Welcome to the Fail Forward podcast. The purpose of this podcast is change the negative stigma around failure into a positive. Failure is only a negative if we do not learn from it and we give up. Welcome back to the Fail Forward podcast. Today, I'm absolutely honoured to have Ben Drury, the culture guy, coming on. And as you guys know, I always talk about culture being one of the four pillars, along with marketing, sales and marketing, numbers and systems. So when me and Ben were chatting, Ben has done a lot of culture stuff for me in my business. I was like, I've got to get Ben on for the Fail Forward podcast. This is also our second attempt. So we officially did fail forward because we tried it once. The internet let us down, and I'm not going to rant on for an hour about internet in this country. But yeah, this is the second attempt, and it's going to be a better attempt because we're going to fail forward in true fail forward fashion. So welcome, Ben. Good to have you here.
Thanks again, Henry. For having me.
So tell me, Ben, tell me a bit about your journey, because obviously you've not always been the culture guy. Tell me about where did work life start for you, and what sort of journey have you been on to become the culture guy?
That's a great question, and it's quite a long story. Hopefully I can condense it into 60 seconds. But like you said, I haven't always been the culture guy, and I didn't leave school thinking, you know what I want to do? I want to work in culture. Nobody does that. But I started life in tech, building internet banks back in the 90s before Google.com existed. And I worked in all sorts of companies. I've toured with a theatre company. I'm a trained child protection social worker. I've worked in retail. I've worked in education. I've worked in banking. And all the way through, I'm watching how kind of leadership and execs treat their people. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like the best way to get what you're asking people to do. But you're the exec. You must know what you're doing. You're the leader. You must know something I don't. And it took about 20 years to realize that they actually didn't. And at that point, I started to put some ideas down on paper, put some thoughts out there, and other people came to me and said, you know what, I've been feeling the same. Can you come and help us? And it kind of snowballed from there, and I got a few clients, and I wrote a book, and I kind of fell into it by accident, but I love it, because it comes down to the fact that I think I see the world in a slightly different way to other people, and therefore I see things, and I see the way things affect individuals and affect people, and that allows me to look at cultures and go, well, is this the best way to get what you're trying to get done?
Would you call that empathy?
I'm hesitating because I probably would, but if I use that word, it means I've got to understand my children and my wife better, and I'm trying to avoid getting into that discussion because I'm lousy at that side of it.
I know, but I think you can have empathy in different occasions. But I think, seeing things differently, it's something certainly my wife has helped me with a lot over the years, is just seeing things from other people's point of views, and understanding why people work the way they do, and why we are the way we are.
You see it a lot on social media. I often watch people that, when you see these kind of massive, just these scandals where people have posted something on social media and it's just gone boom and the world's I'm like, surely you saw that coming. How would you not see that is how people are going to react? And I can't get my head around it. So you're right, there is a level of empathy that you just kind of see the way things are going to pan out.
Yeah, well, I have to have a lot of empathy because I get trolled quite a lot online by other tree surgeons who think my tree surgery mastermind is something of a con, and I have to think in their position, and quite often, and this is going a bit sideways from culture, and we're talking about empathy, but quite often the person who's attacking or being aggressive or being upset, there's a lot more to it than me, and they're not actually happy. And one of the biggest things someone taught me is it's like looking in a mirror. Sometimes people mirror the way they feel, and they're attacking out because they're unhappy and angry. So I have to remember that when I'm trying to reply with integrity to someone trolling me, and have to just imply it in a nice way. Anyway, we're going slightly sideways away from culture. So tell me, going back when you were doing all these different jobs you were doing, what were the bosses like that you worked for?
It's a great question, and it did vary. I've been in some toxic situations, and I've been in some really, really good situations. I've worked for a high street bank where my line manager, brilliant, absolutely understood what was going on. She was just so good, and she cared about people, and she understood people. The organisation itself, terrible. And it's just, it is what it is. And I've worked in some organisations where I've worked with toxic bosses, and they're just, the goalposts move on a daily basis, and then they come and say, well, why haven't you done this? I'm like, because you told me not to do that, because you gave me something else to do yesterday. Well, it's like, but you should have done that as well. I'm like, that's not what you said yesterday. And it's just, the whole thing just makes it really, really difficult to operate in that kind of space. So yeah, I've been through them all, and I've worked in places. I worked in an educational establishment that will remain nameless, and my boss was completely inept. Absolutely lovely person, but didn't know how to do a job. And obviously that stops us being able to do our job to the best of our ability. And it's varied. And, you know, the organisations I work with are similar. Some are really, really bad and need some help. Others are nearly there and just want some hand-holding for that last 5%.
Yeah, I totally agree. My experience with culture, I kind of fell upon culture in the sense, but that was all driven from bad bosses. So I worked for a recruitment company. The boss or manager was a cokehead, aggressive type person. Joyful, and he just bullied me every day. Literally verbally abused me every single day. And I remember just thinking, what is this about? Like, why am I getting attacked? Like, I'm coming to work, I'm being reliable, I'm turning up, I'm doing what they're asking me, but because he's not getting the results, he's getting pressure, and then that's being pushed down to me. So his way of dealing with it was just shouting at me every day and calling me a wanker and just being generally abusive. I had another boss in car sales. He was ruthless. We didn't hit our target one Sunday, and he pulled everyone into a room and then asked everybody to pick somebody to get sacked. And we had to pull straws. I mean, like, and we had
That's
to pull
going to
straws.
motivate everybody next week, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, funny enough, the best salesperson drew the short straw and left, but he was back within a few days because it was all just a bit of a show, a show of these are how big my balls are. And there was lots of different things, and I won't go into deep of it, but a lot of that made me realise I had some bad tree surgery bosses that every time something went wrong, they'd like shout at you, be really aggressive, and I kept thinking, I'm coming to work and I'm getting this abuse. And I remember starting my own business, and one of the drivers to start my own business, one, my father telling me to do that from a young age. But when I started my own business, I thought, I'm going to be a different type of boss. I don't want to be a boss that's going to shout at people, abuse people, be rude, be obnoxious, be all those things, because I know that I didn't enjoy it, and I know how I felt. I didn't want to turn up to work. I didn't want to be part of that team, and it really didn't work out for me. So I kind of stumbled across culture but I didn't really know what culture was then. I just looked after my team really, really well. And then what happened with looking after my team is they turned up every day. They were reliable. The customer service was amazing on site. All these great things happened for it. And actually, when I met you, Ben, I was introduced by James and Kelly to you. It was at a point when I really needed it to be refined, and I started understanding what culture meant more than just, oh, well, I look after the team and we go for a beer together. So that's my view of how I found culture. So how did you then transition from, I know you said you sort of got some people doing it for people, but where did you start learning from it? How did you really transition from, being an employee to the culture guy?
That's a great question. I mean, there's some things in what you said yourself in terms of culture. A lot of organisations that I worked with were doing quite well, but they didn't know it was culture. And what they hadn't done, which is what you've now done, is articulate it so everybody was on the same page and understood what was going on. And I think I kind of stepped into it in that space where I saw people like yourself, and I said, well, actually, if you want this to really work and you want to elevate it and you want to really kind of drive it home and differentiate yourself from everybody else in the market, we have to distill what you've got in a way that everybody can understand it, and everybody else as part of the organization can come along and go, yes, I understand what we're trying to build here. I understand why you behave like this, and I understand why this is a rule that we have in this organization. And so I stepped into that space, and because I was able to translate what people were trying to build into words, I was able to articulate it and write it down and start to write playbooks for people to say, look, this is who we are and this is what it means on a daily basis. So it was exactly that I kind of stepped into. That's how I went from having an idea and understanding it into, well, what is the product here that people actually need right now? And it's grown since then in terms of I've written down a lot of the framework that I use, and we're now looking to kind of license the framework to other providers next year. But that's the space I stepped into, the space that you were talking about, where you were building it, but you couldn't quite articulate what you were building so everybody else was on the same page. That was the space that I initially saw needed my help.
Nice. And so how do you articulate it? What are the steps, or not the steps, but what do you need in your business to articulate it?
Business is really, really simple when you look at it. It's relationships with purpose. That's all it is. We gather a load of people to do something. That's it. But within that, there are what I look at essentially three parts of the business. There's the people you've got, who have you got, who they are. There's the language you use and the way you talk about your business, all the kind of things, the marketing, the internal comms, the way you talk to each other, the language you use to describe your business when you talk to each other, all the kind of jargon terms that you might use. And then there's the systems, which is another part of your model, the systems and processes. And what I found was that while people had a really good understanding of what they were trying to build, they weren't necessarily able to find the right people to help them build it. They weren't necessarily using a language that reinforced it and kind of reflected what they were trying to build. And that their policies and procedures didn't necessarily align with what they said were the behaviours they wanted from people. And so I kind of put all that into a model that said, well, actually, once you've kind of defined who you are and what you want in that way, and we've got the playbook together, what does that mean for how you hire and who you hire? What does that mean for the language you use and the way you market your business and the messaging you use? What does it mean for your policies and procedures? I'll give you a few examples. You know, if you talk about diversity and all your marketing has white men in it, nothing else, you've got to fix that, because that does not reflect who you are trying to be as an organization. That's a simple example. There are a lot more sophisticated, subtle ways of getting it wrong. And similarly, you know, in your processes, if you talk about collaboration, yet you're bonusing people on individual performance, you're not going to get collaboration. Things like that, all those kind of things needed looking at. And people often weren't far off, but it's what I call the stick of rock principle. You know, when you go to the seaside in this town, you can buy what we call sticks of rock, which are hard candy, and all the way through the hard candy is the name of the town written in it. So whenever you break it, you can still see the name of the town. And that's what culture is in your organization, that no matter where I step into your organization, whatever touch point I've got, whether I'm in a meeting, whether I'm chatting over coffee, whether I'm looking at your marketing, it all looks and feels the same. It all reflects who we are as an organization.
Like the blood, it's like the blood veins, it's like the blood running through the business, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so because I'm just mindful of our listeners, and some of them are tree surgeons, some of them property, a lot of different business owners. What would you say if someone's saying, but Ben, like I hear what you're saying, but I still don't really understand what culture is. Tell me what culture is in layman's terms.
Well, let me give you a quick example. Whenever I do a workshop, I always bring this example up because it usually makes people emotionally connect with what I'm saying. But if you imagine you bumped into an old school friend that you hadn't seen for 20 years, they just moved back to the town you lived in, didn't really know anybody, they just started a new job, and you thought, a reasonably sensible friend at school, so I'll invite them round to my house for dinner the next day, maybe rekindle a friendship, help them out, connect them with a few people. So you invite them back for dinner the following evening. And the next dinner rolls round and you tidy your house and you prepare a beautiful meal and you lay the table, and there's a knock at the door and your friend arrives, introduce him to your other half, and you sit down to dinner. And this is where things get a little bit weird. Not good weird, weird. Before you've even sat down and pulled your chair in, they're sat there and they've grabbed a load of food off the plates in the middle and they've piled it high on their plate and they're just shoveling it in with their hands. They're not using the knife and fork. And you're like, okay, what's going on here? And you start to ask them a question. Maybe once we kind of get into things, they'll calm down a bit. Maybe they're a bit nervous, but you ask them a question and they talk for 30 minutes. They never ask you a question. They never engage in real conversation. They just talk at you for 30 minutes while spitting food across the table and shoveling it in with their fingers. And the language they use, oh man, the language, words you've never even heard of before, but the language is so right, the air turns blue. Now, when I tell that story, usually there are people squirming in their seats going like this, going, oh, this is so uncomfortable just to listen to this story. And then I ask, well, what would you do in that situation? Would you just kind of feign tiredness and usher them out and never invite them again? Or would you challenge their behaviour and say, you need to act more appropriately? And culture is that little word, appropriately. I've never sat down and put together the orientation manual for visiting Ben's house for dinner. I've not had that conversation with anybody. My wife and I haven't sat down and put down the rules of the game, but somehow there is an expectation of how people behave when they come round to my house. And it's unwritten. It's just what we expect of people, but the way we live our life. And that is what culture is, that every organisation will have those unwritten rules, those ways of working, those things that we think are normal and acceptable behaviour. That is what your culture is. And some organisations are really explicit about what that is. Some organizations, it happens organically, but from my experience, when you let it happen organically, it usually ends up somewhere that you're not happy with. But it's simply that. What is appropriate in this situation? And what you'll find is that when two or more people come together in any situation, whether it's two friends at school in the playground, whether it's a family, whether it's thousands in a multinational corporation, there will be unwritten rules of the game. There'll be a shared understanding of what's going on. And that is what the culture is.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And then just following on question from that, if you were going to, obviously, apart from coming and using your services, if someone's listening to this now and they're like, I just want to get one step in front of me to start getting my culture sorted in my business, what's the first sort of step you would do to take on to start just trying to work out what your culture is or how to start implementing it?
Yeah, the first thing is to answer a couple of questions. Why do you exist? What is it that you do that you add to the world as an organization? Ask yourself that question, and not, I make widgets. Well, why do you make widgets? What benefit is that with the widgets to the world? Actually, and it might be that we make the best widgets, so they only need to buy them once because our clients are getting ripped off by multinational widget manufacturers. So we're going to step in. That's what we're doing. We're making it easy for our clients to build their stuff because we give them the best widgets. Okay, there's a purpose there. And the next question I would ask is, why do people get fired from your organization? Because what that does is start to highlight, what are your values? What are the non-negotiable lines that you don't want people to cross? And if you put legal stuff to one side, because breaking the law, I'm assuming that's non-negotiable. People are going to get gone for breaking the law. But within the bounds of what's legal, what are the lines you don't expect people to cross, and when they do, they get fired? Because that is clearly where your values lie, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. And so you've just mentioned values. Would you get people to start writing down? And another question to this is, because I have a set of values. My set of values are similar to my company HRG's values, but they're different. So where do you draw the line between someone's personal values and a business values? And would you suggest people just to start writing those down?
Yeah, a place is just to start, because and values are one of those things that it becomes quite difficult. And one of the problems organizations often get is they don't go deep enough. They'll talk about professionalism, and they'll talk about honesty, and they'll talk about reliability. And I'm like, yeah, but why? Why do you want those things? And usually it comes down to, because I genuinely care about the people we supply succeeding. Okay, well, now we're getting to a real heart with core value. It's not about professionalism. If you being professional stopped your clients succeeding, you'd stop being professional, because it's about clients succeeding. So, the core value is about, how do we serve our clients' success? That is a core value. And yes, professionalism, reliability, trust might aid that, but they're not the values. They're symptoms of the values. And so you've got to start by writing it down, but you have to then start digging deeper to what links all these things together. What are the core things that link all these things together? And that is often where you need a third party to come in and start poking around a little bit, so we can really kind of land some of those properly.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Love that. Do you know what? I was just on a call with someone a minute ago. And one of my mentees, he was saying, I'm having a problem keeping hold of my guys, and I'm having a problem with this, and I'm having a problem finding guys. And I was like, so have you worked on your culture at all? I haven't got the time. I just don't have the time. I'm trying to do everything else.
You haven't got to hire the right people till you, it is that vicious circle.
I don't have the time. So because I thought, okay, well, how can I word that into a question? But I thought I'd just tell you the situation. What would you say to anybody that's sat here going, two things, why bother? And I haven't got the time to do that. It's all right for someone else to say, I'll do it, but I haven't got the time.
Those two questions are massively linked as well. Why? But if you get this right, it frees up a whole lot of time. So, but again, you have to put in the time to do it. And yes, it is going to be painful, because you're constantly firefighting. And if you're constantly firefighting, you clearly got some work to do on your culture. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. It will be painful to transition, because you're going to have to put in the work to change it. And in doing that, there's going to be a lot of pushback from the arseholes you've currently got in your organisation, clearly, if you haven't had any problems that don't belong there. And it's going to be all sorts. But if you don't do it, those problems are just going to continue. You're just going to have to constantly firefight. You're never going to get out of this hole. It's like, I haven't got time to build a ladder to get out of this hole because I'm too busy digging. I can't help you.
Yeah.
You're going to have to do it. And if you don't have time, you don't have time. You're never going to solve the problems that are causing you not to have time. But the flip side of that is, when you get it right, you find the people that can help you grow your business. You find the people that can help ease that pressure. They step into the role. They're people that turn up to work full of energy, hitting deadlines, going the extra mile, solving problems before you've even found out there's a problem. We all want people like that. And it doesn't necessarily, you can start really, really simply by changing how you advertise. And, a really simple example, restaurateurs come to me and say, I can't get wait staff. I can't get people to, I'm advertising for waiters and waitresses. I can't get them. We just haven't got enough staff. I'm like, stop advertising for waiters and waitresses. What you want to advertise for is for people who want to help families make memories that they'll talk about in 20 years' time. Yes, you're going to have to clear tables and you're going to have to deliver drinks. But that's not what we want. We can teach you to do that bit. What we want is people that connect with people, people that make people feel comfortable, people that create environments where couples can come and have the night of their lives. That's what we want. Yeah, waiting tables and delivering drinks that's sundry part of the job. And so you can start just by that. What do you want people to do? I was talking to somebody yesterday. They were looking for somebody to, I can't remember what it was for. It was an architecture practice looking to kind of use natural resources within homes. And they were looking for somebody to kind of work with clients on that specific area of natural resources within homes, stonework and wood, etc. And all the adverts were about the skills they wanted. People that had this experience and this skill. I'm like, why are you advertising for that? You want someone that's passionate about the natural world indoors, passionate about changing how we build buildings to use natural resources in sustainable ways. Yes, the rest of it you want as well, but unless you articulate it like that, you're not going to get the people that want to stick with the job.
I totally agree with this. I get people all the time, tree surgery industry, it's really difficult to find staff. And all I ever see, and I tell my mentees on it, they just list all the qualifications someone needs and what the company needs. And it's like, we need A, B, C, D, D, D. And then people just go, and I'm like, at that point, you need to be almost marketing yourself as a business to say, this is what we do, and this is what we want you to be part of. This is the environment that we deliver. This is how we look after our team. This is what we do. This is the experience you're going to get. This is to come and be part of this really cool team and be part of something really special moving forward. And not enough people do that. And it's very much still seems the recruitment process overall seems very old school in that way, that we're just asking for people to tick boxes. And once you tick those boxes, then we might consider giving you an interview. And it's lacking the creativity for someone to go, cool, as you say, I want to create experiences for families. That sounds cool. And you might even get more people going into being waiters and waitresses because they go, actually, I've never really thought about that. That sounds like a cool job. I'm going to go for that.
Well, it's like logistics companies. They're all advertising for lorry drivers. Last year, when we left the EU, a lot of lorry drivers went home at Christmas and never came back because they're all EU citizens and not British citizens. And so we're really struggling. And I'm like, stop advertising for lorry drivers. Advertise that we are the backbone of Britain. Without us, the rest of the country doesn't run. Without us, entrepreneurs and small business shop owners and everybody else cannot do their job. You make that happen. Come and help me keep Britain running.
Yeah, love that.
That's what we're looking for.
Love that. And you know what? Going back to the original question, because I kind of knew the answer in my terms, but I didn't want to share that at the beginning because I wanted you to explain your bit. But what I've seen, the culture in my business is that our staff retention is huge. We rarely have anyone leave on their own accord. Our customer service is amazing. Like if you read our reviews in our business, it almost looks like the same person's written all of them, because you get the similar thing of the staff were kind, attentive, nothing was a problem, that they cleared up really well. All these sort of, these good buzzwords that they're doing. We don't teach our guys customer service. We don't do a customer service course. We just look after them, and then they turn up and care. My tree surgery business is not perfect in any way, and I'm sure there's lots of different things that we could solve within it. But one thing that I know is we do well is we look after our team, and that keeps those days when it's difficult, it keeps them working together as a team. One of our values is teamwork. So they all know that they want to be turning up and being part of the team and part of that. So yeah, I just wanted to share my experience of doing culture, and we probably don't have the most perfect culture in the sense it's still probably not flowing through the blood veins. But one thing we've done is that we've made sure we've got the values and the vision and where we want to be, and our purpose. One of our purposes is to be one of the top 100 companies to work for in the UK, because again, I had those really crap bosses, and I was like, I don't want to be part of an organization that doesn't look after its teams.
Nobody does. Yet business owners aren't prepared to put in the work to build the companies that people do want to be part of, and that's the problem. I wish they did, on the one hand, because that'd be brilliant, but it does mean I'd be out of a job if they did.
Yeah, exactly that. So in the terms of, because I'm sure people still think, oh, well, this culture thing, it's all a bit fluffy. It's all a bit fluffy. That's not going to work well. Like, is it going to cost me money? So it's going to cost me some money.
It's going to save you money. It's absolutely going to save you money.
So this is the next question, is what are the numbers?
Research shows that revenue goes up by up to 700% when you got a strong culture, without doubt.
Wow.
There's
that's huge.
less
700%. That's huge.
700%. Yeah. And there's less detailed research on the savings, but the savings from staff turnover are huge. Every person that leaves costs you an annual salary for that person to replace. Often that's generally the yardstick. So if you can reduce that by 3 people a year, that's 3 salaries you've saved. Like I said, the research is not as detailed in that, but the numbers stack up very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's crazy actually thinking about it. I'm not going to name him, but there's another tree surgery business about half an hour away from us, and he's a character. I get on with him, but he does not look after his staff well at all, and he's just got a revolving door. And I wonder how much that's costing him just in that revolving door of, maybe not delivering work because he's not got enough staff, or losing people, having to continuously advertise and recruit, that there's all those costs. So it's quite a difficult thing to quantify, isn't it, really? Because a lot of business owners look at things as hard numbers on a spreadsheet. And can you define culture on a spreadsheet? Can you do that?
You can, if you compare a company before and a company afterwards, because that gives you really clear metrics that you can look at. Every company I've ever worked with makes more revenue and reduces cost after we've worked with them. Whatever you spend on someone like me, and there are plenty of people out there doing it. I'm part of a group of people that all do this, and they're all brilliant. But whatever you spend on me, you will get back in spades in increased revenue, reduced staff turnover, reduced management costs. How much time does it take to manage crap staff, even if they don't leave? You know what I mean?
Loads. Well, I've been through only a couple of times. We've been through full disciplinaries with staff, and we've got a HR consultant, and that HR consultant costs us money. It costs me time. It costs me stress. I've had some most stressful. One of them was an extremely stressful time, and it was a key member of staff in our business. And actually, the HR process worked, but and he still works for us now. And I think that's something down towards the culture. But it does. It costs a lot of money. HR. Doesn't it? It costs loads.
Absolutely.
Thousands.
And I always look at it as, the legal side of HR is like a fence that's right up against the cliff. If you fall over that, you're buggered. Culture is the fence we build 30 yards in. So we can make mistakes, we can get it wrong, we can fall over the fence, but it's all fixable because we're all on the right team and we're still on the right side of the wrong fence. You know what I mean? And that's the way I look at it. If you're playing your business right up against the cliffside fence, you make mistakes, it costs a fortune and it's horrible and it's painful. You get your culture right and you start operating here, mistakes can be made and they can be cleaned up, and often they're made and cleaned up before you even realise they've happened, without it doing too much damage to an organisation. It's that age-old adage. If you've got to BCC somebody in an email, or you've got to pull out the staff manual and look at point 4, point 2, point 1, you're probably already in trouble. But if you get your culture right, you almost never have to go to that point, because you deal with it.
Definitely. What would you say the biggest challenges are in implementing culture into businesses, like businesses that are already well established with multiple staff? What would you say the biggest challenges you see?
The biggest challenge by far is understanding and being okay with people going, oh, well, this is shit, I'm leaving now, thanks very much, bye. Like, well, no, that's okay, because they are the people that generally don't fit the culture and will be causing kind of friction within that culture. Not that they're bad people or bad employees or wrong, just not the right place for them to work. And that is one of the hardest things. Well, if I do this, I'm going to lose staff. Like, yes, you are. but you're going to lose the wrong staff, and we're going to put a recruitment thing in place, which means you'll have the right staff begging to work for you, and there'll be hundreds of them, and you'll have your pick and choose of the best, because they will see what you're building and they want to be part of it. But it's really scary to do that. It's really scary to go, well, hold on a minute, if I'm 2 staff down for 3 months, what does that mean? I can't afford to do that. So that's by far the hardest part, just overcoming that hurdle. And it is very much, you are going to have to do this because you've hit a growth point. You're not going to grow anymore until we get over this. And yes, it does mean you might have to dip so you can take off. But it's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, and the old cliche saying, which I love this saying, and I didn't really understand it till a few years ago, but when one door closes, another one opens. And we've had that with staff leaving, and we had it when we'd always sort of had a good culture, but when we really drove into the culture, when you came and helped us and supported us and helped us write the playbook, I remember having that conversation with you and saying you might lose some people, and I was accepting of that at the time because I wanted to get the culture right. But in fact, I didn't realise that one of our main guys left, and I was like, oh, okay, crap, this is difficult. But the whole company breathed a sigh of relief, and suddenly everyone went, oh, do you know what? It's a lot more relaxed around here now, isn't it? And I'd sort of thought this guy was, brilliant at what he did, which he was, but he was not the right culture fit. His attitude wasn't the right culture fit. The way he talked to people wasn't the right culture fit. And in fact, after that, someone else stepped into his role within the business. And it was like, okay, great, cool. Okay, this works really well. And
it's so good to hear that. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And it happens. It's scary. But literally, we've had guys who have moved on who, it always seems to happen in our firms where the main team leader, who's the main team leader, because it's easy to get a big ego in our, because you're swinging around holding big chainsaws and using big kit. And it always seems to be like our main team leader gets a bit too overconfident and sort of loses the culture and starts yapping at people a bit. And you sort of, it's happened. I've seen it. I've been running our firm for 14 years now, and every so few years the main lead climber moves on, and you go, damn, what are we gonna do now? And then someone else springs up through, and as that's what I always say, as one door closes, another one opens. And it certainly seemed like that way for us with the culture. Is when we started really working on it, we did lose one person, and it was a bit of a, okay, that's right, let's move on, cool, because we're going to get the right people in.
It's more than just culture fit. What you find is when you get the right people, they bring a cultural contribution as well. They look at what you're doing and go, you know how we could do this better? You know what we could do here? You know what would really make this work? Whereas those people that don't fit, they'll get on with the job and they'll put up with whatever values you impose on them, but they don't bring life to what you're doing. And culture is a kind of living, breathing thing. You've got to have people that bring life to it, and you've got to have people that contextualize it depending on situations. And there'll be contexts that you as an organization have not been in, and therefore when you go into those, somebody somewhere's got to step in and go, how do we operate here? What does our culture mean for how we do business in this space?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I learned along the way is like you said earlier, the language. And we, one of my main managers used to say, thanks guys for your hard work this week. And I'm like, no, we don't say thanks for your hard work. Thank them for their commitment, because one of our values is commitment. So start thanking everyone for their commitment. When we do an appraisal, rather than rewarding someone on maybe their skill set, we're going to reward people on the fact whether they've had fun at work and they've been part of the team and they've got the commitment, which are all our values, and they're always trying to improve themselves. So how important would you say language is in a culture?
Absolutely. A language is one of the key one of the key spokes of the culture canvas that I use. Words make a huge difference. And I'm now struggling in the back of my mind to come up with an example that really illustrates it. But language is massive. You can use completely different words and they mean something completely different. Just trying to think of an
just
example.
Like my hard work, when we have people saying hard work, because you're just telling everyone that work is hard.
And it's not about, it's not, that you can talk about, I'm just trying to think of one now. This is the trouble, isn't it? We're doing it live. You forget these things. It'll come up in a minute.
Come back.
You're absolutely right. It's that concept of, well, how do we talk about what we do? When we talk to our people about, like you said, the work they've done, are we talking to them about the values that are important to us, or are we just talking to them in the same way every other organization talks to them? Let's stand up and be different and make it fit with our values. We constantly talk about cheerleaders in our organization. and it comes with a connotation, but that allows us to then kind of unpack it a little bit. And for us, cheerleaders are about, whenever we have a conversation with somebody, do they leave feeling better and more excited about life? If they do, we've done our job. If they don't, we failed. And that's something we've got to fix. And we talk about being cheerleaders rather than critics. And we, people can use the word boss or, for example, in Northumberland, I coach rugby. And I lead a team that coaches women and girls rugby in Northumberland. And some people keep using the term, you're the head coach, aren't you? And I'm not. I'm the lead coach. It's completely different. We're not here for hierarchy. I'm here to help all the other coaches get organised, make sure we've got the right people in the right place at the right time, set a general direction for what we're doing, but everybody feeds in. And those coaches are far better than I am at coaching, and I'm better at looking after people but the term head coach says something completely different to the term lead coach. And it's a minor change, and people go, well, what's the difference? Doesn't matter. I'm like, it absolutely does. Because if you use it enough, people start to kind of drift into, well, that's what this means. It's a hierarchy. He's in charge. Like, well, I'm not. And so it's super important that you get even the slightest words right.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And so one of the main things that we have problems with in tree surgery is that we have staff that break kit. And I get this constantly, but from my mentees on the mastermind, of someone's broken some kit, should I charge them for it, or should they have a disciplinary? And I always have to go back to culture. In that is what kind of culture are you trying to create within your business? Because if every time someone makes a mistake and then you're charging them for it, then you're creating a culture. You're creating quite a negative culture.
They're going to hide it. They're going to start hiding it.
Yeah. So what would you say to that?
Well, I think the real thing in there is, let's stop talking about someone broke kit and let's talk about this kit has been broken or this kit's broken. So you stop attributing because kit breaks. You use it enough, it is going to break. So we talk about this kit's broken. What do we need to do? Rather than Johnny's broken this kit. That in itself is just a massive transition into, well, this is about the kit. It's not about the person. This is about the kit. Let's solve that problem. And yes, don't get me wrong, there will be times, probably not in your organisation because of the people you've hired, but I'm sure there are times in our organisations where people are pissing about and kit gets broken because they've done something stupid. How often, if it happens once, they're probably more embarrassed about it happening than you are. They're not going to do that again, are they? So there is a level to it, but even just simple things like that. Let's talk about this kit's broken rather than so-and-so has broken this kit. Let's move the focus to the piece of kit that needs something doing to it and take the personal out of it. All sorts of things like that. You're absolutely right. And if you've hired the right people, you don't need to worry about blame. If you haven't hired the right people and you have to worry about blame, then you need to sort your culture out and we can fix that.
Yeah. And I always see it as, like, you're right. Like, if you're going to penalise someone for something not going quite right, well, quite often, if it's a health and safety situation, if someone injures themselves on site, who's responsible? It's the director. It's the management. So actually, if someone's broken something, you can blame, like you say, that member of staff for breaking something. But do they need more training? Do they need more support? Was the job organised properly? Is there a bad culture in the business and people just don't care? What's going on for that to happen? That neglect and it's so easy to go, and I remember, because this is where the bad culture came from that I received. Oh, you've broken something, shout at you. And then every time someone breaks something, then they go, oh, right, we're not going to tell the boss. Everyone stiffens up. Things get broken more because everyone's stiffened up. And so many people just see short-sighted. Right, someone's broke something. It's your fault. I'm going to charge you. And then you're just creating a bad culture in itself because everyone's worried, scared about the boss. Everyone's scared about what to say. No one's going to report anything. No one's going to say when something's fixed. Something gets put back in the yard and it's broken. And it just creates this. And it's such a challenge to get people to understand there's more to the picture, isn't there? There's more to the picture than someone is just, if someone has broken something on site, there's more to that picture than just they've done that on purpose.
But there's also a level to which, at that point, what is the most important thing? It isn't blame, it's getting it fixed, getting on with the job. If somebody gets injured, what's the most important thing? Getting it sorted, getting them safe, getting them help. If we need to talk about it afterwards and figure out why it's happened so we can make sure that the same things don't keep reoccurring, fantastic. But right now, throwing around blame and accusations does not actually move us forward. It just keeps us sitting here with our finger up our backside, not getting anything done. Job number one, Let's solve the problem. And the problem is with the piece of kit, not the person.
Definitely. And also it is with a piece of kit and then finding out what's wrong with the person, because quite often shouting at somebody, we do it. If someone's going, oh, do you know what? This guy's made a mistake 3 times in the last 3 weeks. Okay, well, have we actually asked if he's okay? Is there something going on at home? It happened to a friend of mine, and he had a member of staff. Actually, no, it wasn't a friend of mine. It was my contracts manager in his old business, and we were talking about this actually when we had lunch for his interview. He's now one of my main managers, and he said to me, "Oh yeah, I said we're talking about culture," and he said, "Oh yeah, I had a problem with a member of staff. They were suddenly over a month period they were being really difficult, really aggressive on site." And he said, "What I ended up doing is I said I gave him a call." Outside of work, I said, "Can we go for a beer or a coffee?" Met him for a coffee. Everything all right. Found out that his wife had miscarried, and instantly he gave him a wide berth. He found out when Gary told me that story, I was like, "Cultural fit. You are the right person for my business." Because instead of going down, right, I've got discipline this guy, I've got to have a go at him. He actually just took 2 minutes to go, "Can we have a chat?" And then we started this whole thing talking about empathy, and that's where empathy comes in. And I think empathy is a huge thing in culture, is going, okay, so let's look at this from a different vision. Let's look at this from a different angle, and let's speak about what's going on. And I think there's so much more that can be done than just shouting at someone and saying, "Oh, you broke a bit of kit," because you're never going to know why that happened then, are you?
And in that situation, he would have solved the problem far quicker than if he'd gone down the route of disciplinary and shouting at him, because he's got to the root of it and he's gone, okay, how can we help? What do you need? If you have a week off, go through it with your wife, come back better. I mean, I'm not saying a week is what you need.
But exactly that. I think, yeah, that's exactly what I think Gary did, and you're right.
But all of a sudden, a week later, problem is solved, because he comes back and he feels cared for and he knows it's a safe place, etc., etc., so his work improves. You could have shouted at him for 3 months and not get any better, and eventually he leaves and it cost you 20 grand.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's the power of having the right culture. And we were talking about recruiting, right? I met Gary a couple of times before I recruited him, and someone told me about it. Said, "How did you headhunt him?" Well, I took him for lunch and got to know him. He's going to be one of the main people in my business. I want to know who the main person in my business. Does he fit right culturally? Rather than a lot of people, and you probably see this all the time. I need someone. Right, someone's applied. Yep, you got the job.
Yeah, I've seen your CV. I've found your references.
Yeah,
you can do what you say you can do.
How important would you say the recruitment process is for culture?
I always say hire for cultural contribution first. You can train for skill. You can't shift people into you can't shift people into a culture in which they're just not comfortable. It's really, really difficult. But you can train for skill. But often you can find people that are almost there, might need a bit of hand holding, but their heart and soul is so into it, and because they fit, if your culture, for example, always getting better, you hire somebody that's 85% rather than somebody that's 100% but doesn't fit the culture, they will outstrip them very, very quickly because they're constantly looking at ways to get better. I would say it's got to be person. And the reverse is true. If you hire people that do not fit, they will bugger up your organization. They will really get under the skin, and you'll lose some of the people that you shouldn't lose.
Yeah, definitely. Love that. Someone asked on LinkedIn yesterday, I can't remember who it was, if you were employing somebody and there's 4 answers, which one would you pick? The one you trusted more, the one that had the right cultural fit, the one that had the perfect skill set, or the cheapest one? I mean, the cheapest one, I don't know whether that was in there. But my instant action was cultural fit. Well, there was quite a few people that put trust. But I think...
Trust has got to be the kind of foundation of a good culture as well, though. You have to have that ability to go, actually, we believe that you're here with the right intent.
Yeah, if they were the right cultural fit, then you're going to trust them, aren't you? At the end of the day,
foundationally, if they're not there with the right intent and you don't trust them, they're probably not going to fit.
So what would you say to somebody who's still sort of sat on the fence about culture? Why is it so important?
I think for 2 reasons. One, because you will make more money.
It's simple.
I can't stress that enough. Even if you're a diehard Milton Friedman capitalist and you hate people but love money, you should do it this way because you'll make more money. I can't say it any clearer than that. But, and this is where I'm coming from my heart, if we can build businesses where every person in this country goes to work excited and energized and full of life because they're working in a culture that they're excited about, and they go home at the end of the day fulfilled, feeling like they've done something that matters, that not only impacts your business, But actually that has an impact on our communities and the societies in which I live and the schools in which our kids grow up in and the health service. And the nurses are on strike today because of also, actually, all that would probably just disappear if every organisation was built with a culture that cared for people. Pretty much all those problems would just disappear. And so that is why it's so important that organisations do this, because it doesn't just have an impact on your business, it transforms the mood of a nation.
Ben for head of NHS then. That's what we need. Ben leading the NHS forward.
12% pay rise for everybody, except the middle managers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Absolutely love it. No, it's such a great answer. And so just tell me, if anyone's sort of thinking, oh, I'd really like to speak to Ben more and work with him, do you work with any size business now? And what's your niche and how do people contact you?
Well, I've worked with Unilever and McDonald's and Zurich and people up that end. I've worked with 2 or 3 people, kind of startups down the bottom. Majority of my work is with kind of the £500,000 turnover, 15 people kind of space. That's the kind of space I work best in terms of those startups that are just about to go boom but need to structure themselves so they can grow quickly. But the best way to get hold of me is if you search for The Culture Guy on Google. Perfect. I'll be right there at the top.
Boom, straight at the top. So what's next for you? Because I know you share a similar love for the stage and doing keynotes. But so what's 2023 looking like for The Culture Guy, and what's your plans?
I'm really excited because yes, there'll be more keynotes. I'm looking for more and more stages. I've got people working behind the scenes trying to organise that, trying to get me in front of the right people so we can kind of, I guess, evangelise these principles of culture. Really, that's what I'm about. But also, I'm kicking off a membership program as well. So those kind of entrepreneurs that have got 3 or 4 staff need a space to talk about, well, how do I build this? We can help them. We can get alongside them and help them just as they're about to hit the stratosphere and grow fast. We can give them all the stuff they need to make sure that culture is there and grows with them, etc. So that's kind of 2023. That's the key piece of work in 2023.
Love that. We're looking forward to seeing and hearing more about that. So we're sort of coming to the end of our time. What would your final words be to people about culture? And what they, and if they're listening to it and wanting to know more about it, wanting to get something across to their boss if they're in a job, or wanting to implement it into their company.
Tell them to drop me an email and I'll send them a book. That's a great place to start. Send them a free book. But to me, I think the bottom line is, going forward, as more millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha come into the workforce, this is going to become more and more a differentiator. Companies that do not think about this first are going to start to find it more and more difficult to get staff. And a lot of those companies are not going to survive the next 15 to 20 years because this is key. The group of people coming into the workforce now want to know that work is a meaningful part of a meaningful life. They want this fluidity. They want culture that works for them. They can come together with like-minded people and do something that matters. And so if you're going to survive the next 20 years, you have to start thinking about this stuff without a doubt. And you have to convince your boss, your CEOs, your executive team to start thinking about this stuff. And if they don't, go find a job somewhere where they do.
Yeah, absolutely love that. You're right. And that's why I think, you talk about Google being a really cool place to go and work, and they've got like bean bags and pool tables and all that kind of stuff around. You're certainly seeing a shift in the way the world is and the way the world works now, with the hybrid and the different ways of working and the cultural fits and how we look after our team. It's as you say, a game changer for companies.
Yeah, it is. And COVID has helped the employees quite a lot because they were forced into it and realized, well, we can operate like this and we like it. So actually, this social revolution is going to continue, and it's only going to get harder and harder for organizations that like to control people rather than inspire people.
Yeah. Inspire. It's that book I told you about the other day.
Yeah.
Great. Have you read that yet?
No, I've got it written down here.
Yeah, you have to read it. It's a great book. It's really, really good. And I was reading it thinking Ben needs to read this book. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on Fail Forward, Ben, and sharing us about culture. What we're going to do is put your contact details in the show notes. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, or if you were listening now and you want to Google it, just Google The Culture Guy, Ben Drury. He will come up straight away and get in touch with Ben. Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Thanks for having me, Henry.